I think it's time to start listening while Muslim. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Let's begin. Assalamu alaikum, people of goodwill. I offer you the greeting of thought, manifested skill.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
A universal greeting from the people of our time.
Welcome, everyone. You are now listening while Muslim. This is a soul sonic global journey into what it means to listen to popular music with a Muslim lens. This is something that all of you can really do. It's a practice that we've been kind of messing around with, perhaps for all of our lives, but intentionally since 2018, when I was living in Honolulu, working for a museum, and made sure to bring our brother, our Sheikh, Ustad of Coffee, Abdul-Rehman Malik, for a residency at the Shangri-La Museum, which is where we conceived this idea of a listening party that was called Listening While Muslim.
As all great ideas, it was founded in a coffee shop, and we're sitting there one afternoon thinking, how is this event going to go? And we hadn't quite put it together, and then all of a sudden, the words sort of appeared before us in the coffee grounds, Listening While Muslim. What would it be like to get a great DJ like DJ Manowak, Asad Ali Jafri, and sit down and curate music, but then offer it to everyone and say, what happens when you start listening to music through a kind of a sonic lens? It's almost like putting a sonic lens on your. I know those are that's a mismatched whatever metaphor, but what happens when you start listening like Muslim? And anyone can do it if you do it carefully enough. And all of a sudden, an entire world of sound and meaning and history and stories start to open up. And so in Honolulu, Hawaii, in the summer of 2018, we started Listening While Muslim, and now we've literally been all over the world.
We've been all over the world, and about 16 episodes, as we're calling them now later. We are here in DC to share this with you during Ramadan or Ramzan, depending on your preference. And this is the second time we're actually doing it in this month.
We are.
In this way, but the first one was virtual. So this is special. This is special for us, and I hope it's special for you. But we just want to go ahead and get started, because tonight we're going to take it to a lot of spaces. Of course, the spiritual realm, the cosmic realm, and everything in between. And it's going to be a little different than our usual Listening While Muslims, intentionally, because of the time of year it is. So I think there's no better way than to just start.
I think we should start. Bismillah.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه بيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان.
That was breathtaking 4 pieces of music, but right at the start, some of you would have recognized right away the voice, the artistry, the subtlety of Dollar Brand, also known as Abdullah Ibrahim. For some of you who know jazz from South Africa, you must know Dollar Brand Abdullah Ibrahim. Abdullah Ibrahim was a South African jazz musician who went into exile here in the United States. He played with people like Duke Ellington, and then here in the United States, he had a kind of a spiritual awakening. In a rarely seen BBC documentary, which I recently got my hands on, Asad, there's an incredible sequence where Abdullah Ibrahim tells the story of how he was at a point in his life where he was really questioning everything. The anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa had reached almost a dead end. Murders were happening every day. He and so many other South African musicians were in exile looking for not only community but meaning in a world that seemed meaningless. And he kept seeing this dream night after night of a figure in white leading him. And every time he'd get close to the figure, he'd try to see who it was and couldn't see. And then the next night the dream would begin again. And he said it was frustrating until one night he reached the figure, and the figure turned around and he knew it was the Prophet Muhammad. And at that point he knew, I'm going to become a Muslim. He changed his name from Dollar Brand to Abdullah Ibrahim, and today is one of the great living legends of the jazz of the jazz piano. And this particular track is absolutely fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you think about it, Abdullah Ibrahim actually wrote what's known as the anthem to the anti-apartheid movement. So he's that famous, he's that popular. This particular track isn't always available. So we found it on this vinyl recording, right? And even though we're going digital, this is us digging in the crates, digging through other things. We're playing things that are already recorded intentionally because we're interpreting what people have already done. And this interpretation and this kind of 4 pieces are intentionally reflections or even literally reflections on the Quran or literally the Quran, which is why we wanted to start with it, right? So of course the Fatiha that starts with Abdullah Ibrahim. But then we go into a hip hop artist named the Divine Styler that finds himself on the West Coast and has this track called Al-Fatiha, where he kind of says that Al-Fatiha, but it's just an instrumental. And he's an MC, but it's just an instrumental track that, of course, is the opening for his album. We also played the Black Unity Trio and their Al-Fatiha, which is a stellar avant-garde jazz album.
Few people know that, in fact, the real advent of the free jazz movement had a number of people who self-identified as Muslim as part of it. And the Black Unity Trio was one of this incredible group. They were all in their early 20s when they came together right out of music school. And they were experimenting with jazz. And for them, their entire album, they only made one album, which recently got re-released. And in that album, every track is, I would say, a tafsir, an exegesis of the Quran. They're taking verses, they're taking passages, they're taking surahs and turning it into music. This is a different kind of language.
That's what's incredible about it too. You don't have to hear it in the lyrical form, in the word form. You hear it in the music, and I think that is just profound. And then we get into somebody. And then the reason we're talking about jazz is because if you're going to talk about listening to Muslim and not talk about jazz, you're not really talking about anything. But also because we are at the WBL Festival, which is a hip-hop organization. But this year, the festival itself has this kind of jazz theme and a poetry theme. Of course, those being foundational to hip-hop culture. But an interesting tidbit is Abdullah Ibrahim, for you hip-hop heads, is actually the father of the MC rapper Jean Grey as well, which is just kind of a mind-blowing and interesting thing. The last track we heard, though, is a group. We were trying to get Jazz is Dead to come perform. We didn't, but that's okay, because maybe they'll come next year as headliners for the festival and the park jam that we're having in Franklin Park. But Jazz is Dead couldn't come. And Jazz is Dead is Ali Shaheed Muhammad, Adrian Young, and people like Doug Carn. And what you heard there, Al-Rahman, literally reciting Al-Rahman. And on that same album, which is called Al-Rahman, there's also a great Surat al-Ikhlas, which you heard a little bit in the intro mix. That's Doug Carn back in the 70s.
1979. And if you ever get a hold of the album itself, it is kind of remarkable because Doug Carn spends all of the liner notes talking through why he's chosen to interpret the Quran in this kind of jazz rendition. And he takes on his critics. That's the amazing thing. He calls his record label Tabligh Records. This is not the 40-day tabligh he's talking about. This is something even more profound than that. And he's talking about, well, why is he chosen? And he confronts the people who reject him, both those in the jazz like in the jazz field who are like, man, that's too religious for me. And then the Muslims are going to say, that's all haram. And he's like, this is my music. This is the way I'm going to interpret the sacred scripture. And he places it out there, and it's stunning. It's beautiful.
You should get it. That's the kind of album we don't bring out on the road, but you should have it. I'm just going to go. I think I want to go somewhere else.
Let's go somewhere else.
I might want to go to Egypt, if that's okay with everyone.
Let's do it.
But I also want to go to Saturn. I want to go to Egypt, and I want to go to Saturn at the same time.
I think there's actually a deep connection between Saturn and Egypt. Asad, we've now entered the metaverse.
We've entered the metaverse. We've opened up some portals. And if you ask the Sufis of West Africa or if you ask the Sufis of South Asia, they will tell you that when the music comes on, when this music comes on, you're calling in people. You're calling in the ancestors in so many different ways. And we're calling in an ancestor right now.
We are.
We're calling in the great extraterrestrial being that came in the form of
Sun Ra. Sun Ra was almost undefinable, a force of nature beyond this earth, beyond the heavens. He occupied many universes at the same time. Sun Ra was not only an artist, he was a school, because some of the greatest jazz musicians of all time came out of the school of Sun Ra. Folks like Pharoah Sanders.
not only that, not only musically, but Sun Ra, some could argue, is one of the pioneers of what we now know as Afrofuturism. And what we now know as world building, right? In our current kind of fictional ways. Before there was a Parliament Funkadelic, there was a Sun Ra that gave birth to that. Before there was a Rem LZ in hip hop, there was a Sun Ra. Before there was a Kamasi Washington, there was a Sun Ra.
And what you heard was two remarkable pieces of music. We started off by listening to the incredible Salah Ragab and the Cairo Jazz Ensemble. Salah Ragab was a pioneer in jazz music and was obsessed with the works of Sun Ra.
Absolutely.
And there was a magic moment where Sun Ra and his orchestra, ARK, arrive in Egypt, and they meet Salah Ragab, and music starts to be formed. Music that transcends this world and the heavens. That first track is called Ramadan Through Time and Space.
Ramadan in Space Time off of this album.
And the second track, which Sun Ra composed after hearing the Fajr, the dawn adhan.
In Egypt.
He would hear it every morning because they would be playing all night. Salah Ragab and his band, Sun Ra and the orchestra, they're playing, they're jamming. And in the morning, they stop when they hear the morning call to prayer. And it was that morning call to prayer that got Sun Ra's imagination going. And he writes this amazing piece called Dawn. And they release an album together, Salah Ragab and Sun Ra. Why? Why have we chosen this? Because for us, in a way, Ramadan is that kind of timeless time, isn't it? We know we're halfway through the month. It seems like it's going so fast. The days sometimes go so slow.
Night and day seem flipped.
Everything is on its head because, in a way, Ramadan forces us to reconsider both time and space and ourselves in it. So we wanted to take us into that space, into the space of being here and not here, being there and not there at the same time.
The moving finger writes and having writ moves on. Neither your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor will all your tears wash out a word of it.
anybody recognize this track that's playing right now? We'll start here. Why don't we start here?
Let's start here.
This is a Sublime album by someone who I think is just an undersung jazz hero. And maybe it's because of the instrument that they chose to play. Maybe it's because they went and took all of these different influences and put them together. But this is the late, great Dorothy Ashby.
Dorothy Ashby played the jazz harp. And one of her most iconic albums is an album called The Rubaiyat of Dorothy Ashby, where she took the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam and interpreted its most famous stanzas in music and in verse. Dorothy Ashby has a remarkable history, not only in music, because alongside Alice Coltrane and our contemporary queen, Destiny Muhammad, was a master of the jazz harp. But Dorothy Ashby had another incredible side to her life. On February 14th, 1965, Malcolm X gave his last public speech in Detroit, Michigan. It was Valentine's Day, but it was also the gala dinner and award ceremony of the Afro-American Broadcasting Corporation, which was based in Detroit. That night, Rosa Parks was in attendance. Malcolm X was the keynote speaker. But before Malcolm spoke, Dorothy Ashby and her husband and their band performed. Dorothy Ashby later on became a supporter not only of Black liberation, but Black radical liberation, and spent her entire life dedicating her music and her work and her charitable work to building the community. It's not without reason that that night Dorothy Ashby was playing before Malcolm X. Because we know Malcolm and the people around Malcolm had a deep relationship with jazz and jazz musicians.
Absolutely.
Because the story of jazz, there is no story of jazz, except that intersects in so many ways with faith, spirituality, and a whole lot of Muslims.
And just for the music nerds, Dorothy Ashby on this album not only plays the harp, but also plays the koto, which is kind of interesting. So you hear these kind of different influences, and she's taking what people may think of as the East in general at that time, right? And bringing these influences together of Omar Khayyam on one hand and basically Japanese music on the other
It's
hand.
incredible. What was that first beautiful track that we heard?
Now I'm forgetting. Wow. Oh, yes. We played other tracks, too. Before that, we listened to McCoy Tyner, and we listened to His Blessings, followed by Prayer by going to Detroit again, of course, the late, great Dr. Yusef Lateef, who not only was an amazing musician that all of us, if we don't know, should be ashamed for not knowing, and should really please somebody have a chair of music in his name at one of these universities.
Ameen.
Because Dr. Yusef Lateef was a doctor of education, was a master musician, was a Muslim, and went around the world, got influences, and had a theory of music. Not a lot of these jazz musicians like the term jazz. And he had a term that was called auto-physio-psychic music. And if you just think about that, auto-physio-psychic music, this is what Dr. Yusef Lateef was doing. He was creating his own notation, his own language. He was a visual artist. He was a science fiction writer. And all of this came together in his music. And the difference between a lot of artists that have passed away and him is that his widow, who is still alive, Sister Aisha Lateef, owns a lot of that. So I think it's on us to kind of bring that to light.
And the great McCoy Tyner in this beautiful piece called His Blessings. Those of you who know John Coltrane must know McCoy Tyner because McCoy Tyner was John Coltrane's pianist and later went on to an absolutely incredible career. There's not one major figure in jazz that McCoy Tyner didn't pass through with. McCoy Tyner became Muslim in Philadelphia around the time that he was hanging out with John Coltrane and Max Roach and the magnificent Hassan, and went on to an incredible career, and he passed away, Allah yarham, a few years ago. But there's moments McCoy Tyner just gets sublime, and this piece, His Blessings, is just sublime. It's zikr, it's remembrance.
It represents that name well. And of course, we're talking about influences, right? And within jazz music, whether it's because of the jazz ambassadors or because of Muslimness, really, however we define that, there's all these influences going back and forth. So why don't we go to one of those influential places, to Nubia, and listen to Hamza El Din with A Wish.
Hari
opens up my eyes, love returning like a flower from a winter of yearning, love returning like a song rising in my heart. Now I know what your love means to me. I won't forget this love or the sweet love song.
We're all the same and all so very different. Divine by design, it all intertwined. Ain't nothing new, but it's always changing, moving. Still waters soft, yet so hard. So what is love? What is it? What is love? What is it? Cool on the outside, hot in the middle. Cool on the outside, hot in the middle, but we got
So we just heard that was Bilal with All Matter, and the reason we were playing this, we've played it before. Our friend Munira from the UK wanted to have this on a special one we did together. But Bilal is performing on Saturday at the park at Franklin Park. It's a free and open festival. Come through. But Bilal really speaks to, I think, a lot of this like Philly soulquarian type of music, right? That is kind of within this Muslim ecosystem that we talk about. But before that, we played Kamasi Washington. And Kamasi Washington is a great, great example of what I would say is we have all these great jazz musicians that influence hip hop in a lot of ways, right? They're being sampled in all of this. Now we're at the point that jazz musicians from our hip hop generation that have grown up on hip hop and love hip hop but are jazz musicians are influenced by both hip hop and that spiritual jazz moment and are making new music like what Kamasi Washington is doing. And especially in the UK with Shabaka Hutchings and Yaz Ahmed and Dorothy Ashby and there's a few others.
Even Kamal Williams.
Kamal Williams, exactly. Kamal Williams. Or in Chicago with Angel Bataweed. And others are just making this amazing music that's very now and doesn't sound like the jazz that your parents or grandparents would have listened to, but something that you could be bumping in your car as well.
Yeah, Kamasi is worth seeing live because it's not a concert; it's a spiritual experience. He's lost. He's lost in the instruments and he's lost in the music, and you're lost with him. Before that, we heard the great Hamza El Din, the oud maestro of Nubia, and I mean Hamza has been sampled a lot, but he belongs to a certain generation when that music, particularly from Nubia and from Africa, was starting to make its way into kind of influencing and speaking to American jazz music and American music in general. And Hamza El Din was one of these incredible bridge personalities, lived both in Nubia and in the United States, was working with artists, poets, writers in both places, was associated with sort of the psychedelic years when people were out on the road trying to find themselves. But he remained not only solid, but real to his incredible Nubian tradition. You know, Asad, we've sort of, the journey that we started on was like we started with Revelation, right? And then we moved into this segment where we heard the prayers, especially the prayers in jazz. But you know, when you get the revelation and you get the prayers, I feel like weak people like me get to the point where it's like, I need someone to take me through all this. Because if I go myself, I'm going to be lost. You kind of need a guide. And there's something in this music, right? And in these genealogies, that all of these musicians, they look for mentors and guides, and they're all part of lineages. So let's dig into the lineage prime.
This is a track that you can only really appreciate as a listening while Muslim exercise. And I'm going to tell you why. In 2009 or so, we had this group, Meta and the Cornerstones, come to Chicago for a community cafe. If you've ever been to a community cafe, say something. I see you. And Meta came as a Senegalese brother with a band of all sorts of people from all over, but a Rasta. And I could understand a few of those Sufi kind of tendencies within the music, but he was going to Jamaica next. He was going to record in Bob Marley's studio, and the music was great, and it was powerful like reggae music is. But Meta, a few years ago, came out with this album called Hira, the cave that the Prophet Muhammad goes to. And the entire album is dedicated to the Prophet in that way. And if you can hear it in this track. And even when he goes, Mecca, Meta is the cornerstone, it gives me goosebumps because he is going there. And I think he's embracing again these traditions that exist, these Sufi traditions that exist in West Africa, especially in Senegal. But you still hear that reggae sound. You still hear that root sound. And it's all kind of come full circle. And it's authentic, and it's relevant, and it's now.
Let's just move to this next track, because this next track just dropped a few weeks ago, and I have been listening to it nonstop. Who is the artist on that first track that we heard? The first any no.
Or where is it from?
Yeah, where was that the first version that we heard? That was the great Toumane Diabate of Mali. Toumane Diabate is how many generations a kora player?
Toumane Diabate is a 72nd generation griot and kora player, a storyteller from West Africa, which he would say from the Mandinka Empire, not even from Mali.
Exactly. We need to say that again.
72 generations
of kora players, and that's Toumane Diabate. Toumane Diabate arguably he's a superstar.
And he's a master.
In world music. He's a master. He trains the kora players. He is the one that everyone goes back to. If you've ever heard Toumane Diabate perform, you will see he was born with a disability, so he walks with a cane. He pulls himself across the stage, and he gets the mic, and he always leans in. He goes, "Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh." And if the audience doesn't respond, he goes back, "You did not hear me." And he doesn't stop until everyone's saying salam, Whether it's at the Barbican, the Royal Festival Hall, the Kennedy Center, the Lincoln Center, that's Toumane Diabate. And Toumane Diabate is, my wife often says that when we listen to Toumane at home, she goes, the music in Jannah will be Toumane Diabate playing the kora. It is ethereal. This is his latest album. Toumane's family is a family of musicians, men, women, singers, uncles, aunts. He got them all together for this album, which is literally called Toumane's Friends and Family. And Toumane,
That's all it needs.
And Toumane begins with Mawlaya Salli wa Sallam. And it's not without reason, right? When we go and listen to these artists on world music stages, Safir, you know this, they're performing for everyone. Everyone's loving the music. But there's an intentionality when they come out onto that stage. I remember, I gotta tell this, the last concert that the great Ali Farka Touré, the master of the guitar from Mali, gave in London the year before he passed away, Allah yarham. He came on stage. I remember the 3,000 people. He came on stage. And, you know, the drummer comes on. The next guy comes on, the singers come on. And then Ali Farka comes in, you know, like a king. He's got his guitar playing, and he's like, Mawlaya Salli wa Sallam, and the crowd goes crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, who in this room is getting it? Because there weren't a lot of people who look like us. And you're thinking, but this is Ali Farka Touré. He's making no bones about his tradition, who he is, who I want to be on stage.
Well, that's the interesting thing. That's the interesting thing about it. This is a traditional, spiritual folk song at the end of the day. And folk songs work like this. People take them, people interpret them, and people perform them. Now, this is obviously an Arabic folk song, if you want to just look at it from an ethnomusicologist standpoint, happening and being performed in Mali from somebody who comes from 72 generations of griots. But then we juxtaposed it to a Pakistani one, which is from a group of musicians in their 20s that are the 26th generation of their gharana or household of musicians, of Qawwali musicians, showing these parallels in these Sufi music traditions. Obviously, the one in West Africa goes back further, but connecting those two and showing that these lineages and these ideas, they move, they transport themselves, but then they still remain connected. And it's interesting that they're both singing Arabic for this particular thing.
Yeah, and you know, Asad, it reminds me of the story that our beautiful friend and brother Rasul Miller tells us. Because, you know, often you can feel in the music of West Africa and the music of South Asia this amazing connection, right? There's a connection between those two places, the cadence, the rhythm, the dance, the movements, right? And so I remember speaking to Dr. Rasul Miller, and we were talking to Dr. Rasul about this. We were like, Rasul, man, what's the connection between West Africa and the Indian subcontinent? And he smiled and he said, I had a teacher in Senegal who said that the connection was deep. And he goes, it's not unusual that you guys have noticed it. He says, because in West Africa, they say that when the angel Jibreel came to the Prophet Muhammad on the 27th night of the month of Ramadan to give the revelation, the wings of Gabriel were so vast that one end touched Senegal and the other one touched the subcontinent. And that both that night were blessed. And it was only over time that that blessing became. And I thought that was that the only explanation that I needed. That was it.
Now that all makes sense to me, and I feel it, right? And I'm like, yeah, this is so good, and I feel it, and I know why people would do this, and I've talked with them and sat with them and seen them, but I don't understand this.
Guesses as to who that is.
And we're gonna leave it there. We're just gonna say who it is, and then we're gonna move on, and that's okay.
That was Olivia Newton-John.
Since we're on this topic already, there's also this idea of, the birth of the Prophet itself and that celebration. And I feel like the Sabri brothers really put it well with this particular record. And also because I brought this from Chicago, I thought we should play it.
जश्न मनाओ कुदरत ने हर मुश्किल को आसान किया अर्श ने ये खुशखबरी भेजी ज़मीन ने ये ऐलान किया अब्दुल्ला के घर से जहां में नूर बिखरने वाला है हलीमा गोद में तेरी चाँद करने वाला है ताई हलीमा गोद में तेरी चाँद करने वाला है ताई हलीमा
I will not try to translate, especially with people like Arif Bhai sitting here and then kind of do disservice or anything. But this is a really special song. Listening to it on the vinyl just kind of really moves me. And I guess I'll say this now. I mean, I don't DJ as much as I used to. I've been DJing for over 20 years probably. And I used to think, oh, it's because I feel limited by it. Or, oh, because I don't want to DJ in this place or that place. And I would keep coming up with excuses. And I think I've just realized that I don't DJ as much because DJing is powerful. And music is powerful. And these frequencies and these words and these messages are really powerful. And for me, it takes me through an emotional, a spiritual state. And it's difficult to continue doing because I have to put my all into it and be really careful about what I do play and what I don't play because it is that powerful. And when I hear things like this, I continuously feel that through my body and my existence and my being.
The track is called Dai Halima, and it's the story of this incredible mother, this incredible woman who took care of the Prophet Muhammad when he was but a child. But there's something in that poetry, the way in which the Sabri brothers sort of unveil the story and make her the center of the story. That's the kind of the beautiful thing about that track, is that the story is about her. She's the center. She's the protagonist, and they take that story forward with such profound spiritual energy.
How many people here understand Urdu, even a little bit, just by show of hands? Okay, just for you, I'm going to just do this real quick, and we're going to move on.
जिस time कहते मोहम्मद कुल हो अल्लाह अहद सुन के फरमाते अली क्या शान अल्लाह समद लम यलिद कहते हसन कहते वलम यूलद हुसैन तो पढ़ती फातिमा वलम युकुल्लहु कुफुवन अहद मौला
ए अली या अली या अली ए अली या अली या अली الرسول علي ترفع عليك ما علي عمر القبور علي افسي فوق مسدول علي عالم 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 يا علي يا علي يا سيدنا علي يا علي يا علي
We had to play that, Take You to Morocco, because Gnawa music and its connection to jazz and its ability to fuse with other things is not much different than the music that we're hearing in Senegal, the music we're hearing in Mali or India or Pakistan, because it has that ability, but it's also deeply spiritually rooted. And that is the great Majid Bekkas, a ma'alam of Gnawa music. Can we bring it back to DC? Can we bring it back to Chicago?
I think
Can we bring it back to hip hop?
I think we have to.
Let's do it.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
This one's for all my brothers and sisters that died. Abraham talked, Muhammad talked, and Moses split the sea. I ain't trying to profit off the profits, so this one here's for free. And to the sisters and the mothers of ours who cover themselves cause they lovers of God, the creator of the worlds, sculptor of the stars. During Hajj we walk through Ramadan, we starve. Though you not eating, there's a feeding of the mind, a defeating of the demons, a seeing of the signs, a leaning on the lines from the servers getting pure. God deemed it unclean, there's no eating of the swine, nor drinking of the wine. We all been to his whim, so I send out greetings to my kind. I'm called Judah, Mr. Norfolk, Mrs. Adams, you're the theme song when I'm Batman. Creflo, player, what's happening? I can hear the truth in your rappings. No, sex before you marry, no grudges you should carry. No lying, not supposed to be gambling. Real talk, Abraham talk, Muhammad talk, and Moses. I know it sounds familiar.
Anybody know who that is? That's our great brother Lupe Fiasco, who's also known as Wasalu Muhammad Jaco. And Lupe is from Chicago, of course. He actually contributed to the Kanye West Jesus Walks, which is why you hear this beat. And this is his kind of thing of like, I'm going to do a Muhammad Walks as well. Our brother Lupe, I play this for a particular reason, is being given an award, the National Rap Laureate, happening this Saturday at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library. It's technically sold out, but I heard a rumor that if you get there right at like 9 a.m., before the doors open at 9:30, you might be able to get in. But he's coming to accept this award. And I think it's really important that we recognize our heroes, even within the hip-hop tradition. Why isn't there a National Rap Laureate? And we got to make it happen. And it's, of course, Words, Beats, and Life that is giving this inaugural award. The interesting thing is, as soon as he heard about it, he was like, I'm coming to get this award. He's now a professor at, an instructor at MIT.
Yeah.
He's a fellow at Yale. And again, it's up to us as a community of people to big up our heroes. And I think Words, Beats, and Life is doing a great job at awarding hip-hop artists, poets, hip-hop practitioners in this way every year.
You know, even if sometimes when you find a guide, I'll only speak about myself. I know lots of people mentor us, tell us the right things, but at the end of the day, it's up to me to kind of do something about it. And you realize that we are weak and we are broken and we got a lot of work to do. And Ramadan, holds a mirror up to my face, certainly, on a daily basis about that. And so, the amazing thing about these musics, right, is that they are life, not just personified, but they are life, right? And life is written into them. And I want us to listen carefully to this next track because it's by someone who recently passed away, one of the great masters of this tradition that some call jazz, a soulful, spiritual guide, sheikh, teacher, wayfarer, and one of the most remarkable human beings that I've read about and whose music I've experienced. And that was the great Pharoah Sanders, Allah yarham. And, if you look at Pharoah Sanders' oeuvre, his work, it is one spiritual exploration after another. He performs with Coltrane, with Sun Ra, with Max Roach, with McCoy Tyner. There's not any great that he doesn't touch, and yet he remains this kind of singular, creative figure, always challenging himself, always pushing himself, beyond the boundaries. And I had the privilege, the year before Pharoah passed away, to meet one of his students, someone who had trained and played with Pharoah. And I said, tell me something about Pharoah Sanders that I wouldn't read anywhere else. He said, let me tell you something about Pharoah Sanders. He says, every 3 or 4 months, Pharoah would call me and say, hey, my friend's name is Alfredo. He said, Alfredo, let me take you for a meal. And he'd go for a meal, and Pharoah would pay for the meal. And he said it'd be just this wonderful opportunity. You know, teacher, student, we'd talk our hearts out to each other, life, music, everything. So Alfredo said to me, I got embarrassed. The great Pharoah Sanders, my teacher, is paying for my meal every time we get together. He said, I'm not going to let it happen this time. So they went, and he got to the cashier before, and he paid. And he said that Pharoah was crestfallen. He said he wasn't upset. He was sad. And he was really sad. And he said, Alfredo said, I knew I'd made a mistake. He says, as we went out of the restaurant, he said, Pharoah, I'm so sorry. He goes, bro, never do that again. He says, because you took my blessings away. And I just thought that was so beautiful. That's why that there's just something so beautiful and poignant about him saying that. You took my blessings away. This track is a remarkable track. It's a tafsir on the Quran.
Pharoah Sanders is a deeply spiritual person, but also I think he was able to resist categorization in so many ways. And so he had all these different influences, but definitely Islam was one of them, because this album and this track is called
Summun, Bukmun, Umyun.
now for something a little different. Before we talk about this one, this section is about struggle, right? That inner struggle that we all go through. And after Pharoah Sanders, we got into Aziz Brahim, who with Luggy. And Aziz Brahim just has these heartfelt songs about longing, about loss. She also represents Western Sahara, so this struggle for land and people as well really comes out. But this next one that we just heard, and it's probably one of the rare times that I'm playing heavy metal on the decks. Does anybody have a guess of where that track came from? We're going to go all the way around, almost halfway, maybe a little bit more than halfway
Around the
across the
world.
globe.
We're going to go to the small village of Singajaya in West Java. And in that village, Singajaya, there are 3 incredible young women, Marsha, Widhi, and Siti. And they together are the amazing heavy metal band, Voice of Baceprot. Their story is right out of the fairy tale. Their parents work the land, they raise cattle, they're carpenters, they run warongs, you know, the roadside stalls of food that are ubiquitous across Indonesia. And these 3 young women loved playing music. Their guidance council at the local school said, I don't know much about academics, but you all got musical talent. Why don't you listen to some tracks that I like? Rage Against the Machine, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Guns N' Roses. And these 3 young women fell in love with hard rock heavy metal. Fast forward a few years, one of them learns to play the drums and doesn't even own a drum set. The other one learns to play electric bass because they go at school in the morning at 6 o'clock to play the instruments. And Marsha, whose English is a little bit better, starts to compose lyrics in English and plays rock guitar. Fast forward a few years, Slash is inviting them to play on stage in Jakarta. The Red Hot Chili Peppers, Rage Against the Machine, are literally writing to them and saying, we love your music. Please, 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 can we collaborate with you? I spoke to them last week for a podcast that I run through the Aga Khan Museum called This Being Human. The episode's going to be out in a few weeks. Please listen out for it. These 3 women are absolutely incredible. Hijab-wearing girls from Singajaya, West Java, who are taking the world by storm. They're the voice of Baceprot.
And what was the name of that song?
That song is amazing. The name of that song is, and I want to get it right, is, Oh God, allow me please to play music. That's the song. And it's a prayer. It's just like, I asked them, I said, what do you feel like when you're in front of thousands of people playing heavy metal music? And Marsha said to me, I feel most like myself. And I said, is there a place for God in your music? She goes, it's all about God. She goes, I never feel closer to God except that I'm on the electric guitar. Wow. I was like, Allahu Akbar.
We're taking you back and forth. Saturday, we also have the incredible hip-hop producer, Pete Rock, coming through.
To know the truth is to know the self. To know the self is to know the Mecca. Mecca is not a state of mind or place. Mecca is a way of life. It is the answer to all confusion. The attribute, Adafo, Abdullah, Muhammad, makes way for the return of the Mecca.
shvatit ćeš da sve je laž. Ostaćeš sam i napušten, s tobom bit će samo rab, samo Allah, istina je. Njemu se okrenimo i recimo ja. Samo Allah, istina je. Njemu se okrenimo i recimo ja.
So we started with this intro from the Pete Rock and CL Smooth classic, I believe 1993 album called Return of the Mecca. And that track, I think, just says it all, right? But then we went into Jaubi. And if you understand Urdu, you know what Jaubi means. But Jaubi has this album called Nafs at Peace. And this is an incredible, incredible album for so many reasons because they're playing classical Indian Pakistani instruments in a jazz form, but also really inspired by hip hop. They have a tribute to Jay Dilla, they have a tribute to MF Doom, and on this album they have a track that we didn't play called Lahore State of Mind, which of course is a tribute to New York State of Mind. It's pretty incredible, and I was at GW yesterday doing like a listening while Muslim class, and I played one of these tracks, and one of the students who said her family was from Uzbekistan came and said, I don't know everything, but I know that nafs is supposed to be negative. So why are they saying nafs at peace? And I was like, oh, what am I supposed to say to this, right? And I was like, well, I think they're maybe talking about the ego and the ego being able to be controlled, right, in some way and being at ease. And I said that because their previous album to this was The Deconstructed Ego. So I think they're doing some really, really interesting stuff with music and with playing with themes and words, and also having one of their mothers wearing the outfit, the garment that she would wear to pray on the front and on the back. So I think it's saying a lot without saying a lot.
And then we heard the Queen Oumou Sangare with a track that takes its inspiration from that iconic phrase in the Quran, kun fayakun. And her song is kun fayako. And it's about being and transcendence. And in fact, all these songs that we've just played, Asad, they kind of take us out of the struggle, right? Into the transcendence. It's returning to the Mecca, right? It's that prayer that Jaubi gives us, that beautiful prayer. It's Oumou Sangare saying, be and it is, you know? And I think there's something about this music. And we finish off with a Bosnian duo, Saima and Lejla, who sing this kind of plaintive prayer, just this plaintive call on the divine. And it's kind of infused with a sense of just being. And I think I feel like it's what kind of comes out in Ramadan for me all the time, is that you're gonna fall down, you're gonna get up, you're gonna fall down again. Part of it is just being where you are and knowing that somehow you're connected. And it's in the falling down and getting up that there's also the joy and the blessing.
Absolutely. And I think on that tip, maybe as we go to our last few songs and section, maybe we close out on that ethereal tip. Maybe we go up into the cosmos a bit and hear what's coming out currently. Speaking about heavenly music, two of those tracks were just released maybe in the last week or two.
Yeah. Well, we started with Arooj Aftab,
Grammy Award-winning Arooj Aftab.
and her latest album is with Vijay Iyer and Shahzad Ismaili, and it's just it's. I mean, I don't even know how to describe the album.
Completely ethereal.
Yeah, it's otherworldly, and that track was called Haseen Thi. She was beautiful. And then we heard the amazing Bahraini British trumpet player Yaz Ahmed, who is shaking up the jazz world with the most unique sort of. I mean, how would you describe Yaz? I've interviewed her, and I find it difficult to describe.
Just
her
has a
music.
really interesting musical take that it is inspired by kind of Eastern scales and maqam in her jazz, but it's also very much jazz. She also has this album that's really, I think, a seminal album because of what it tries to do. It's called Polyhymnia, and it's basically an album that's got tribute tracks to contemporary women that are essentially change makers. So each one is kind of named after somebody else. And then we finished with a brand new track with two other masters, one that we mentioned, Toumane Diabate on the kora, and the other
Kayhan Kalhor, who plays the stick fiddle, the Comanche. And I think this is a collaboration that has, like, the universe has been waiting to witness. It's two of these incredible artists on stringed instruments, the Comanche. If you've ever seen the Comanche being played, it's a stick fiddle. You really hold it like this and you play it like this. But they often say that the Comanche is the mournful voice of the soul made alive in music. And it's like that, it's speaking to you. It's speaking the depths of your heart. Things that you didn't know were there are coming out when Kayhan Kalhor plays. And if you've ever seen him play, he'll play for an hour and a half and he won't open his eyes. He'll be like this the whole time. And the music is working through him. And right next to him is Toumane Diabate. And I love the title of the song.
Yeah, the title is special. The sky is the same color everywhere.
And inshallah, it's going to be the first single, we're hoping and praying, of an album and a collaboration that I think we've all been waiting for.
We're going to close out with one last track. We won't talk about it much. We're just going to let it play a little bit because of the timing. We're going to go to Holy Islamburg. And I could only find this on a video. And we're going to play Al-Vida Ramadan as we come to a close.
رمضان شهر رمضان شهر رمضان شهر رمضان الوداع 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 شهر رمضان الوداع 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 شهر رمضان gift from Rahman protecting shield from Shaitan. You fill our hearts with Allah's nur, taught us to love Him alone, not forsake of Rasul. Al-Nida. Ramadan shahru, Ramadan shahru, Ramadan shahru, Ramadan. Al-Wida, 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 shahru Ramadan.
My name is Abdul-Rehman Malik,
I'm Asad Ali Jafri.
and you've been listening while Muslim.
Muslim.